Hey guys, welcome back to Rabbithole Hobbies. I'm Sam. Today we're painting minis and I'm gonna do this ogre. You can see he's already half primed because the last time I painted a mini I put it a little bit too much primer and I didn't want to waste it, so I slapped him on this guy, deciding that he was going to be the next guy I was going to paint. So ogres are like giant humanoid creatures, usually about 9 or 10 feet tall and somewhere between like 600 to 1,000 pounds depending who you ask. They're lazy and brutish creatures and they have real bad tempers and often end up squabbling or fighting between themselves about treasure and stuff. They like to eat raw dwarf or halfling or elf meat, and quite often when they're mucking down on someone and they have some leftover body parts, if they're finished eating, they'll use that to make their clothing. And they quite often are looking for treasure and take trophies and whatnot from their kills. So what we're gonna do for this guy is give him a nice like fleshy skin, but probably like a little yellowish tinge to make him look a little grosser. Some dirty nails. We're gonna paint his club. I'm gonna see if I can maybe make more of a rusted color for the metal parts on his club, and his little loincloth here I'm gonna try and make to look more like it's been made out of flesh. And then on the back, we have some skulls and a barrel and something else that I'm not really sure what it is, that are all hanging off of his rope backpack. So we're just gonna kind of paint them all in and see what we can do. This should be a pretty quick paint because there's not a whole lot of different complicated color mixes and stuff. And the last thing that I've seen is that there are some cuts on him, so we're gonna try and bloody them up a little bit to look like he's just come out of battle. So the first thing that I'm doing to get prepared for this is I've cleaned out my wet palette and actually made it wet. So what you do is you just get a damp paper towel, damp, not wet. So when you put your paint in here and you're painting, if you have to put it down and you don't want to finish it all right away, you can seal this up and the paint won't dry out and you can actually come back later and use those paints again. It also helps with the spread a little easier because when you're painting minis, it's such a small area with such fine details that it's always better to do a couple thinner layers, more watered down layers of paint than to try and glob on too much at once, because you might fill in some cracks or some details that will kind of ruin the realistic look from it. So we don't mind it being a little bit watered down. You can always go over it lightly, let it dry, and then do another layer to cover everything up. The first thing we're gonna do is finish priming him. It's important when you're priming to make sure you get everything covered. You don't wanna leave any holes or any spaces because it will make a big difference when you're doing your final painting. The purpose of the primer is to allow the rest of the paint to kind of stick to the material, the plastic that it's made out of, a little better. So we don't want to go light on this or rush through it. Now that he's primed and ready to go, we're going to mix the skin color first because everything else is on top of it and it has the most coverage. So for this, I think I'm going to try mixing a little bit of Flump Pink with a tiny bit of Ancient Mummy to see if we can get that ogre skin color. I'm fighting the urge hard to paint him to look like Shrek, but that's not quite the color we're looking for. So we're gonna add a little bit of Trient Green to get that gnarly little tinge to it. This is really the fun part, trying to mix colors up that you haven't done before. And that's starting to look a little bit more like what we want. We're not too worried about getting paint on anything else right now because it's gonna go on fairly thin and we can paint over it after, which isn't a huge deal. As I'm doing this, I'm just moving from different parts of his body so that when I come back around, the parts I've already painted are dry and I can pretty well just immediately do the second coat without having to wait for the whole thing to dry. And you can just tell where you need it, where you can see the primer flashing through a little bit because the paint is still really thin. So now that we got all of his skin done and we got all inside the little cracks everywhere, I think the next step is to do the loincloth. And I said I wanted to make that look kind of leathery like skin. So I'm thinking I might try a little bit of Ancient Mummy mixed with some Bugbear Brown to kind of make kind of a skin kind of leather color. I think that looks too similar to his actual skin. So I'm gonna try and wipe most of that off. Put a bit of leather in there. Still not sure. I think I might add some Underdark Gray because it's just not quite where we want it. Now we're getting somewhere. I do like the idea of a little bit more of a purpley color. Just playing around here to see kind of what we like.
And I think that's what we're gonna go with. This is where you have to start being careful because we want to get all the edges in here, but we don't want to get paint back on the skin we've already done. So this just takes a little bit of patience. And now I'm gonna get the wood onto his club. We're just gonna start with Bugbear Brown. I'm also gonna add the same brown onto the barrel on his back here. You can see that I did get a bit of the brown on his hand, but that's not really a big deal because we can touch that up with some skin tone again after and cover right back up. So to start off with the rest of the club, I'm gonna put on some Mithril Silver, which is a metallic paint, so it does shine a little bit like metal, and possibly try dry brushing on a bit of reddish brown after to make it look more like a dirty metal. If that doesn't work, I might come back and try mixing this Mithril Silver with a red and a brown. I haven't really made my mind up on that yet. So after painting on the metal color on the club, I think it actually looks really good, and I'm afraid that I'm going to ruin it. I tried a little swatch down here where I put the metallic silver and then tried dry brushing on a couple different colors, and it covered it up more than I thought it would. So I think I'm just going to leave this for now. I might come back to that after, but I think it looks good the way it is. So the next step is going to be to paint these ropes on him. And for that, I'm gonna try making a brownish yellow, I think, because I don't want to have too much just straight brown in the piece. I think we'll go with a little bit of angelic yellow, rigid leather, and we'll just test this out and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that'll look good. I've already gotten some on him, but like I said, we can always touch that up a little bit. After, for this part, you want to make sure you have very little paint on. Like I said before, doing 2 layers is much better than trying to do too much at once. And because this is so fine and so delicate, you don't want to have too much paint on or you're for sure gonna spill it all over the place. All right, now that our rope's all done, we're gonna move on to all this junk hanging off the back. So the skulls, I'm gonna do a mixture of Lawful White and a little bit of Ancient Mummy to kind of give it that aged bone look. All these little things that are hanging off there, I've decided are gonna be leather straps. So we're gonna do a bit of a brown mix. And this thing here that I couldn't decide what it was, I think I've decided that that's gonna be a bundle of herbs. Maybe he just killed a ranger and stole the herbs from the corpse. I'm not sure, but we're gonna do that in a greenish color. All right, that's looking pretty good, I think. Now we just have the tiny details we gotta figure out. So there's the rings on the barrel, the nails on the fingers and toes, facial features, and the cuts, and we should be done. So I'm gonna start with his nails, which I wanna look a little bit grimy. So I'm thinking some putrid slime mixed with maybe a little bit of brown to give us like a darky color, or maybe some gray would be nice. I'll take a little bit of this brown. A bit more brown. Perfect. A little bit of this darker under dark gray, which has a bit of a purpley tint. Just want to make it a little bit more distinguishable from the skin color. Ugh, clean your nails, bro. Here I'm gonna go with the silver for the barrel, as we know it's metallic. Teeth are gonna go a yellowish tint too, and the eyes are probably gonna be similar color to the teeth, maybe a bit darker, and then just a bit of red in where the cuts are. I'll try just straight putrid slime maybe for the teeth, because it sounds disgusting.
Dragonfire red for the moon. Now, the base on this is pretty boring. So I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna take a few of my leftover bricks and carve them into rocks, and then I'm gonna grab some sand and I'm gonna glue that stuff all onto the base, let it dry, and then I can paint over that, and then we can do our final wash. We'll just leave that to dry. Now that this stuff's all dry, we're gonna paint it. Gray for the rocks and probably brown and green for the base here. We'll just see how well it sticks. If the paint doesn't stick too well, I might have to put another layer of a watered down glue on top of it to hold it all in. So I think I'm actually gonna paint most of the rest of the ground brown, and then paint a little bit of green on top of that in spots where I'm gonna try gluing on some preserved moss that I have to make it look more like grass or some kind of foliage. Had a little bit of an argument with myself. I couldn't decide if I was gonna make a greeny brown, like a greeny brown kind of wash to go on his skin and stuff or not, and I think I've decided I'm just gonna go with this standard black wash. This is for sure the best part. It really just comes to life. So for the little bit of moss, I'm just gonna put a bit of glue on, and then take the moss and rub it in between my fingers so that it breaks up into smaller pieces. Throw a bit of glue in a few spots. And then just take this, sprinkle it on. We're ready for the absolute final step, which is to paint the border black around the bottom. Hope you guys found that super helpful and interesting. In just a second, I'll show you the final reveal after he's all finished up. This is only like the 8th mini I've painted, and 6 of those were the set of goblins, which are all fairly similar. So I know it can be kind of intimidating to get into something like this, but I mean, I'm no expert and I think it turned out fairly well. If you found that helpful or interesting or anything, please like, comment, or subscribe. And if you're gonna paint your own minis, have fun with it. Mix some colors and just have a good time. You'll get better. And thanks for watching. Here is the Ogre.